Hi everybody, this video is to show you how to use a variables grid when you are planning your investigation. It's a pretty good tool to use. I found it very useful when planning investigations, so now I'm going to show you how to use it too. Okay, this is what a variables grid looks like. At the top here you can see that it says elicit variables. Now elicit, that's a pretty funny word, isn't it? Elicit. I'm going to circle that. What does that actually mean, elicit? Well, elicit, I'm going to close up here. Elicit means that when you elicit something, you draw out things about ideas about a thing. Elicit is maybe to think about. Elicit is coming up with lots of ideas about something. So when we elicit variables are those things that can change or affect the results of an investigation. So the first thing that we do when we get a variables grid is to elicit variables. Okay, we're thinking about everything that could possibly change or affect our results. Now, I'm going to do an example one here for you. What things might affect, let's say, plant growth. Oops. Move that over. Oh, gee, I'm having a bad time now, aren't I? Oops. Oh dear. Try again. Plant growth. What things might affect plant growth? And that is a question. So we're thinking about everything that can affect that. Now let's go back to our variables grid here. What I always do is put in the middle straight away what we're going to measure. And I know what I'm going to measure by the question that I am posing at the top here, okay? What things might affect plant growth? So I know that in my investigation I will be measuring plant growth. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in here, plant growth. Okay, and whenever I'm going to measure something, I will give it a big red M, so I know that that is the thing that I'm measuring. Okay, now around the outside in all of these boxes, this is where I'm going to be putting up the variables that I elicit when I'm thinking about it, the variables that I think about or that come to my mind when I'm thinking about plant growth. So I'm going to go ahead and think of those. The first thing that I know affects plant growth is maybe sunlight. So I'm going to put sunlight here. Another thing I know that affects plant growth is water. Okay, plants do need water to grow, so that's definitely something that can affect plant growth. I'm going to go ahead and say perhaps hot or cold. Maybe temperature has something to do with it. Maybe the type of soil that they are growing in might affect plant growth. Or what else could affect plant growth? Sunlight, water, hot and cold. Oh, what about, so we've got for water up here, might be the amount of water. But what about the type of water? So maybe salt water or fresh water. Salt or fresh. What else can affect plant growth? Okay, let's think about this. Plants need sunlight, water, and food to grow. So maybe that comes down, food comes down to the type of soil. What about if we add fertilizer or not? Maybe. What about if we... I'm having trouble thinking of any more. It doesn't matter if you don't fill up all of the squares. It also doesn't matter if you need more squares. What we're trying to do in this part of the process is come up with as many variables as we can, because we don't want to get halfway through our investigation and discover that we've missed an important variable and we have to start our investigation all over again because our results are invalid. All right, so this is why we do this, to think of as much as we can. So when we do the investigation, we know it's fair because we've controlled all of the variables. All right, I'm going to leave that part of the variables grid for now. If I do think of any more, I can put them in there. So the next thing that we have to do when we are using a variables grid is to decide which of those variables we are going to change, because in a fair test we only change one thing. Now I always use green for this, I don't know why, I just do. So I'm going to pick one of those things to change in my investigation, and I think I am going to change the type of soil. So I'm going to put a C here in this one, give it a circle, and what does that mean for all of the other things? Sunlight, water, hot and cold, type of water, fertiliser. What do I do with those variables? Well, we think about cows moo softly. We know that cows moo softly is a clever way for us to remember how to run a fair test. Cows means to change one thing, and we've already done that. Moo means to measure something, and we've already got that one. Now, what do we do with the rest? S, cows moo softly. S is for keep everything else the same. All right, so I will keep this bit the same, this bit the same, this variable the same, that variable the same, and that variable the same. Okay, so my plants, I'll have a control. Oh no, hang on a minute, what will I do? If I'm changing the soil, I'll be changing different types of soil, but I'll make sure that my plants have the same amount of sunlight, the same amount of water, are in the same location, so they'll have the same amount of warmth, the same sort of water, and the same amount of fertiliser. So I know that the results that I get are because we changed the soil. I'll know that that is the reason why we got the results. All right, so now that I've done that, I can go ahead and look at my focus question. This is super duper simple. All right, basically, our focus question will need to have what we are going to measure, and it will also have what we are going to change. So I look at my grid. What happens to plant growth? So what happens to the plant growth? Gosh, it's hard to write neat on these things. The plant growth, when we change, what are we changing? The type of soil. The type of soil. And that is a question. I'll put that there. Excuse the messiness. Great. So now that we've done that, we've done our variables grid. We've done lots of thinking. That's why I call it a thinking grid. Now we're able to take that information that we've just come up with and we can transfer it straight over into our organised planner. Okay, now if I just shrink those down for a bit, you can see that here it says, what are you going to investigate? And then it says down the bottom, a little clue, can you write it as a question? The good news about this is by doing a variables grid, we've already come up with our focus question. Okay, so what happens to the plant growth when we change the type of soil? So we can pretty much just go straight ahead and write that in here. Here comes my messy writing. What happens to the plant growth when we change the type of soil? Now we could pretty question up by, adding a little bit more detail. So what happens to the growth of a plant when we change the type of a soil we put the seeds in? We could make that question a lot neater and more complete, but that's just fine. Okay, so you can see that I took this information, or actually, no, take that away. Oh, undo. Why are you not undoing? Maybe now it will undo. Yes. So, sorry, I took this information and I put it straight into my planner. Now I can take all of this information and I can put it straight over here into my planner. Okay, because this is where we can show how we're making our test really, really fair. So what are we going to change? Well, we've identified that already. We're going to change the type. Oh, I need to go bigger so I can fit it in the box. Type, of soil. Okay, now what are we going to measure? Oh, we've got that already. We're going to measure the plant growth. So I'll get back over here to my measure box. We're going to measure the plant growth. Now, keep the same. Let's have a look at that. Keep the same. What are we going to keep the same? If we read the little helper on the bottom, which variables will we control? So we control variables to make sure that our test is fair. I go back to over here and I'll make it smaller. Whoops, not that small. I can see that we are going to keep sunlight, water, temperature, fertiliser, type of water the same. So I will go ahead and dot point those. Oopsies. Silly me. I need to go a little bit bigger. I will go ahead and dot point. Need to keep the sunlight the same. We need to keep the amount of water. I can't write that small. Amount of water. Type of water. And the temperature and the food. I'm just going to write food. That's much faster to write than fertiliser. Okay, so I'm going to keep all of those things the same so I know that my investigation will be fair. Now, up the top here, I'm going to go back up to this box. This is where we write our prediction. Okay, so it says, what will you predict will happen? And then over here, very important, don't forget this bit, why. If I read my clue down the bottom, my helper, it says, give scientific explanations for your prediction. You can't just write, I think that one plant will be big and one plant will be small. That tells me absolutely nothing. So your prediction needs to start like this. I predict, no, that's a T, silly me. I predict. Okay, the younger years will usually write I think that, but for the older kids, year 3 and 4, we definitely write I predict. I predict that the plants in the... now this is where you'll have to already think about what kind of soils will you be using to change. Let's just imagine that I put one bunch of seeds in soil, like potting mix, one bunch of seeds in sand, and one bunch of seeds in clay. So that's 3 different types of soil. I predict that the plants in the potting mix will grow taller, have more leaves, and look healthy, that's a I-E-R, by the way, because that's where I write my scientific explanation. So I've got this word here because that tells me I'm going to give a reason. If I go a little bit bigger because I'm running out of space and my writing is too big, my scientific explanation is all seeds need the right conditions, there's an S on the end there, to, what happened there? Oh, there we go. To germinate and grow. They need a good soil that will give the seeds or the plants nutrients to support growth. I won't finish off that because I've run out of room and I just want to show you how to use a variables grid and how to plan. All right, so now that we've done that, we have got our investigation question, we've done our prediction, and we've backed it up with a scientific explanation. We've identified how we are going to keep our test fair with those 3 boxes. The last thing that we need to do when we are planning is describe how we will set up our investigation and what do we need. I often find it's easier to do this bit first. So I will go bigger again. What do we need? Well, we're going to need some seeds of some sort. Okay, you'll probably decide that when you're doing your investigation. You will need something to grow them in, like cups. Okay, you're going to need water, and if you're going to make it a fair test, you're going to want some measuring cups to make sure that you put the same amount of water into each one. You are going to want to have some different soils to test. Like I said before, potting mix, sand and clay. You are going to want to, we don't need to put sunlight there because we'll just put them in the sunlight. Or we'll make sure that our water is fresh. It's the same type of water. If we put them all out at the same place, they will be in the same temperature. We're not going to worry about giving them food because we'll just test the soil, so we won't even put food into the equation. Okay, I think that's pretty much all we need. We've got measuring cups to measure the amount of soil as well. All right, so then we go over here. How will you set up your investigation? This is where you will write your method. So I'll just put that there. This is your method. Okay, and your method is where you give yourselves some steps to conduct your experiment. So you'll have some steps. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you're writing a method, you are just giving instructions for someone. If they were going to do your experiment, your instructions need to be clear enough that they could follow them. When we write our method, we always start, the first word of every step should be a verb. So we're looking for doing words, okay? Such as you might start off with place, okay? Place the soil in the cup. It might be measure, that's a doing word. Measure the amount of water for each cup. It might be a doing word or a verb like put the plants out in the sun. So that's what you are doing. It should give you a really good instruction on what to do in the next step because it is a doing word. That's what a verb is. Okay, now if I just shrink that down so we can see the whole lot, it's a huge mess, but hopefully that makes the thinking and the planning part of an investigation a little bit clearer. So I know this is a really long video, the longest one that I've made, but I think it's also a very important one. Okay, because as you get older and you get into maybe grade 5 and 6 and definitely in high school, you'll be required to plan your own investigations, and I can't do it all with you every single time because I want to see you growing and being able to do these things yourself. So you need to learn how to use a planner and, more importantly, use a variables grid. They're a very, very good tool to use. All right, I've talked enough. I hope that this video has been beneficial because it's a pretty important one for us in science. So thank you and see you later.